Well, it says it's recording.
Yeah, your face is on the screen.
That's great. Yeah, it's a nice face, so that's okay.
Oh my god, I can see up your nose, miss.
Quickly.
Show.
Do you want me to get closer? All right. Oh, I should probably close my emails. Oops. Okay, so is it recording? Yeah, I mean, it looks to me that it's recording, so let's, I guess, move on with what we're doing today. Okay, so this is not the document I want to open. This is the one I want to open. So I would normally put this up on the board, but I'm just going to do that. I haven't put this up on DOMAP yet because it is a work in progress. Okay, so just again today we're going to just brainstorm a few more different ideas for your investigation for you to think about. These are some ones that I came up with ages ago and forgot that I actually wrote them down, and I just want to add to them today. So I took a photo of the ones on the board from yesterday. Okay, but let's look at the ones that we've got in front. So we've got a topic that you could look into is breastfeeding. So just off the top of your head, what are some potential things that we could go from there in terms of breastfeeding? It is scientifically proven that breastfed is better than the bottle. So you wouldn't want to do a 2,000 word investigation about that. But perhaps you could do a debate about a lot of people choose not to breastfeed because of the varying social implications of people going out and having to breastfeed in public. They feel very uncomfortable. There's still a lot of stigma around that. People think that breastfeeding is gross. Is that still happening in today's society? And how prevalent is it? Okay, so you could do a little debate about, whether or not it is difficult to breastfeed in 2020, and you could do interviews of current mums if you know people that have really young children. So current could be in the last 5 years, okay? Remember we were talking about keeping it relevant, keeping it within the last 5 years. So probably interviewing parents that have max 5-year-olds or 4-year-olds, okay? So that is something you could be looking at in terms of breastfeeding. Are you right, guys? Yeah. Okay, great. Anything interesting to add though? No? Okay. Immunisation, what direction could you take that topic in investigation? Kind of spoke about it a little bit last lesson. What are immunisations? Caitlin? Protection against diseases, stuff like that, okay, like whooping cough and all that sorts of stuff. All right, a lot of modern parents and a lot of modern families are choosing not to get their children immunised. Maybe you could do, again, a debate about whether or not you should or shouldn't. What are the health implications of not getting immunisations? What are the health implications of getting immunisations? You can definitely get secondary resources. You can still get primary resources because you might be surveying different parents about how much they know about immunisations. Do they know the benefits? Do they know the negative impacts of not having an immunisation? Is there enough education out there for parents to make an educated decision, or are parents actually making uneducated decisions and just doing what they're told to, okay? You could be doing an interview of a GP or a nurse or a midwife or a doctor or a paediatrician if you have access to any of those types of people, okay? So an interview can take place over the phone, and it can take place as a Q&A sort of email if you are not able to make that face-to-face contact, okay? So that's a different direction you could take that in. Looking at technology, so mobile phones, TV time, iPads, games consoles, what sort of investigation topic could you look at for that? Anyone? Yeah, how is technology impacting child's development? That's a very broad topic. So you would want to pick an area of development or 2 areas of development. You wouldn't want to focus on cognitive, physical, social, and emotional. You'd want to pick 1 or 2, and you'd want to do that really, really well. You don't want to be picking a really broad topic and only skimming the surface of some of these things, okay? You really want to try and go into a lot of depth, because the more investigation you can do, the more critical analysis you can do, the better grade you're going to get, okay? Courtney, you had your hand up.
I was going to say, but
Okay. All right. So you could be looking at, what is the impact of too much screen time? The government recommends that children under 2 have no more than 1 hour of screen time a day. Do we think that young children are getting more than an hour of screen time a day? How long does a movie go for? Over an hour. All right, and I know a lot of kids that are watching at least 2 or 3 movies a day. All right, just as entertainment, or children's TV shows, or just games on their iPads or something like that. Children aged 2 to, I think it's, don't quote me on this, but I think it's either 2 to 17 or 5 to 17. So you would be in that age bracket, wouldn't you? You're only supposed to have 2 hours of screen time. Who thinks that they have more than 2 hours of screen? 2 hours a day.
what? A day?
That's the health. That is the health recommendation. Right. So you've got to talk about with young children and how the technological advancements. Can we stay on track just for a second? The technological advancements, how prevalent technology is through education. Is that an achievable goal? Is that an achievable health goal? And what are the health implications for our children that are growing up and going to be, in the future? Are they going to have really bad eyes? Are they going to have, are they going to be overweight? Are they going to have really poor, gross and fine motor skills? Are they going to be socially isolated? Stuff like that. What are the implications of increasing technology in education right now? Okay, that is something you could look into. Parent interaction. You could look at any ideas to do with parent interaction. We've got a couple of topics, I think, from yesterday's lesson. You could look at, there are some touchy topics, but you could look at divorce, you could look at blended families, you could be looking at domestic abuse, you could be looking at different different discipline methods, maybe, perhaps, I don't know, something like that. You could be looking at perhaps how discipline has changed over the few decades. What discipline, I'm competing with people talking, and it makes it really hard for this recording and for me to think. I actually really struggle to think when people like Courtney are talking while I'm talking. And people like Cassidy and people like Caitlin. Just calling a few people out. All right. So everybody at home knows who's disrupting me.
Courtney's talking.
Okay. Looking at single parent families, what are the potential implications there? If any, it doesn't necessarily mean that at the end of your research you've got a whole list of negatives. You could end up saying that, my research has shown that children that are in single parent families don't actually have that much of a disadvantage. That might be the outcome of your investigation. It doesn't mean, you might have a hypothesis. You might say that throughout this investigation, I'm going to predict that children that come from single parent families are going to be at a higher rate of disadvantage than those that don't come from separated families, okay? And then throughout your research, you have your focus questions, and then at the end you say, this was my hypothesis. Did it meet your expectations? Did it not meet your expectations? Why? What do you think? Stuff like that, okay? So you can actually do a hypothesis. You can predict how you think your investigation is going to go. Looking at 3-generation families in the modern society. Does anybody know what that is related, what that means, what that's relevant to?
Is it like, it's the same thing with grandparents?
Yeah.
Oh, too smart.
Yeah. All right. Does anyone want to build off of grandparents?
Like when they bring you up.
Yeah, sure. Yep, that's what grandparents are. Good job. Yeah, you could be being raised by your grandparents. Why might you be raised by your grandparents? What are some scenarios where that might happen? Deceased parents incarcerated. Yep. What about just working parents? Yeah, working parents. What if your parents have a health issue and they're in hospital? Okay, there might be some particular reasons, but also that could be in the direction of a lot of modern families now. It is becoming much more affordable and practical to have 3 generations living in the same home. This is very popular in countries like China, where grandparents, parents, and grandchildren all live under the same roof. So it makes sharing the load a lot easier, you know, cooking, cleaning, helping kids with play, helping kids with learning, all of those different sorts of challenges. Maybe it would take the load off of with financial pressures because you don't need to go and take your children to childcare because you've got built-in childcare, your grandparents. Okay, so it's a very popular thing that is starting to come out. Some people are making that decision to have 3 generation homes, and some people are being forced into that situation because of the cost of living and for the above reasons which we just talked about, you know, ill parents, deceased parents, incarcerated parents, working parents. Okay, so that could be a direction that you look at. So step parents, looking at, you know, blended families again, looking at domestic abuse. What are the social, emotional implications of being raised in a home where there is domestic abuse? It doesn't necessarily mean that the child is experiencing any abuse. They could just be witnessing it. So what are the short-term, long-term effects? Does it impact their learning? Does it impact their social ability? Does it impact their emotional regulation? You know, are there things that you could find out? But that is a very touchy topic in terms of primary resources. If you are interested in doing something like that, you really need to have a think about how you can access information that is confidential, how you can access information that is sensitive, or at least you're, you know, being more appropriate about it. Divorce, lots of different scenarios. Looking at loss and grief, it could be the loss of a grandparent, parent, a sibling due to multiple different reasons. It could be the loss of a pet. You could be looking at the loss of a home, you know, bushfires. It feels like a very, very long time ago, but it's still very relevant. We've got all this other world crisis stuff going on, but we just got over bushfires, didn't we? Okay, so a lot of children are experiencing the loss of their home and they are grieving their home. They are in an unfamiliar surrounding. What are the developmental implications of dealing with a scenario such as a bushfire, okay, or a big family member passing away? Okay, how is that going to impact the child? Special needs and the impacts on the family. It doesn't necessarily have to look at the special needs of the child, like the impact on the child. You could be looking at how is living with a really high functioning child from on the spectrum that can't talk, can't really communicate, can't socially regulate, emotionally regulate. You know, how is that going to impact other members of the family? Because there are some stresses involved with that. There's a lot of support groups that parents have to take their children to. Are parents able to work if they've got a child that has a lot of special needs? You could look at that if you know somebody that has special needs. I mean, rural living and isolation. We are very much not rural, but some of you might know some family members or people that live in rural areas, and you might look at whether there are any detrimental developmental impacts or whether there are positive things. So, you know, they might have more opportunities to play outside. They might be less inclined to play digitally, but maybe is that going to inhibit them when they look at going to school and going to work if they don't have access to technology? Maybe thinking about social isolation currently. You could look at that. That's quite relevant. People having to socially isolate. What are the implications for young children that can't go to childcare? You know, childcare isn't somewhere where you just drop your kid off and they get babysat all day. There are really strict programs in those daycare centres, even OSH centres. There are specific learning programs in place for children. Looking at postpartum depression. If you're interested in that, if you don't, what is postpartum depression, anyone? Anyone? No one? Yeah. Okay, so you'll be pregnant for 9 months, you give birth to your baby and you're experiencing lots of depression. You might not have feelings of connectedness to your baby. You know, a lot of people say that when their child is born, they're all filled with love. It's the deepest connection they've ever felt. But some women, when they do give birth to their baby, they don't feel those feelings of connectedness. They don't feel that overwhelming sense of love. And that can be really upsetting for a new mum. And there can be lack of sleep. They could be struggling with their emotions, a range of different things. So postpartum depression is something that used to not really get talked about, used to be, you know, really stigmatized. People were judged a lot, and that's really bad when you can't talk about what, you know, what's affecting you and get help. A lot of people don't get help, they just soldier on. Okay, so that's a very relevant trending current topic that you could look into. Discipline, yep, different trends in discipline. You could look at even comparing different cultures and their disciplinary what's the word I'm looking for? Trends? I don't know. There's actually a really funny comedian, I think she's Indian, and she talks about how in India hitting your children is very normal and very recommended as a means of discipline, whereas in countries such as Australia, America, England, it's more frowned upon. It's just with our cultural values, but it's you could do an interesting comparison about different cultures. Brianna, you've been on your phone for a while.
Yeah.
That's right, just monitoring, making sure that you're present. Yeah, great. Again, different parenting styles. You could be looking at parents that bubble wrap. Does anyone know what bubble wrapping is? Yeah, helicopter mum, helicopter dad. Yeah. Does anyone want to explain what bubble wrapping is, Caitlin?
Like, oh, I wish to play outside, just go get her. Or, oh no, I can't do that. You might fall. You know, like, or you're not going to play sport because I don't want you to hate it.
Yeah. So, you know, what could the potential implications be of bubble wrapping a child? What could be? Yeah, they're not confident. They're scared of new experiences because they don't know that, you know, they're not very resilient. If something bad happens, all right, they might not be able to fix the problem. They might not be able to feel comfortable about, oh no, I've grazed my knee. It's just a graze. You know how we all have that, oh, it's just a graze. They might get really, really upset and overwhelmed about it because they've never... Yeah, they don't want their mum to get mad at them. I told you not to go outside. I told you something bad would happen. Why don't you listen to me? And they'll be scared to go outside and do lots of things again. Going outside is really good for being exposed to different bacteria, so you can develop your immune system, a whole range of different things. So you could look at, you know, helicopter parents and bubble wrapping. What else did we get from the other day? I took a picture. We got auditory processing disorder, childhood obesity, looking at abuse and neglect, looking at divorce, looking at child psychology, looking at veganism, autism, blind or deaf, so looking at disability, looking at physical disabilities as well as mental disabilities, looking at substance abuse and prenatal development. So you could be looking at fetal alcohol spectrum disorder if you wanted to. You could be looking at a range of different sensory needs, foster care, just health issues in general. What else? You could be looking at gender identity, looking at same-sex parenting. That might be an interesting and very relevant topic. Looking at children that are quite sick. I'm using yours now, Brianna, by the way. Look, so children that spend a lot of their childhood in hospital, how is that impacting their development? How is that impacting the family? Adoption, looking at anxiety, looking at maybe, do you know, it's actually proven now that the children of today and the children of the future are struggling to develop resilience. So you could be looking at, is it true that, you know, children of the future are not going to be as resilient of children of the past? What's leading to that? How is resilience developed? All right, how can we promote the development of resilience in young children, and how is that going to be beneficial for them when they grow up? Okay, so what's an example of resilience? Someone? Maybe somebody's experienced some adversity, something bad, however big or small, has happened. I'm going to try and... So your ability, you get knocked down, and it's your ability to bounce back and get back up again. Maybe resilience for some people is going to the shops with the intention of buying 32 rolls of toilet paper, getting there and there being none. All right, are you going to break down and cry? Are you going to get really angry and abuse the people at Woolies because there's no toilet paper? Or are you going to accept that there's no toilet paper and I'm just going to have to come back tomorrow? Do you have the resilience to deal with that situation? Some people don't. Do you have the resilience to go for a job interview, get knocked back, and be able to move on from it, accept that there are lots of other jobs out there? I wasn't ready for that job. There was somebody out there that was more ready for me, and I'm going to get back up and try again. I'm going to accept that was something that I wanted, that I couldn't get, and I need to make my peace with that. So you could be looking at children's resilience. So for an example, children of today, maybe you really, really, really wanted an A for your assignment and you got a B. Right? It's really, I used to get really upset when I thought I'm going to get an A for this and I got a B. But you know, what is a child's or a student's ability to be able to accept that and go, okay, this is the feedback that I've been given. I believe that this feedback is relevant. I'm going to make my peace with this grade and I'm going to try harder for my next assignment because I want that A. That is what I'm talking about in terms of resilience. So children of today are told that they don't, well, we're told that they don't have as much resilience as they used to. So how can we build and promote and develop resilience at a young age? Because remember, you do need to focus on 0 to 8. So after the 8, you would cut off. So what sorts of things could we be doing in that sense? So lots of different topics that you can potentially choose. We're still in our brainstorming sort of phase. Yesterday, I did ask you to come up with some topics that you were interested in. Here is a bit of a broader example of the directions you can go in. So for the rest of the lesson, I just want you to continue to think of different topics, think of different ideas. You can come up with potential questions or potential hypotheses and feel which one you like more. If you do find that you have a particular topic or a particular question or a particular hypothesis that you're interested in, the next step is thinking about collecting resources, Courtney. The next step is thinking about where can I get information from? Can I get primary resources? Where can I get them from? Okay, that's the direction that I want your thought process to go into today, because by the end of next week, I want you to have come up with a question and then focus questions. That is my plan for you next week. It's a lot of time to do that. It's a lot of time to be thinking about what your investigation is, because on our following week, in week 11, I then want you to start producing emails or a list of people that you could potentially interview. And if you are doing a survey, I want you to actually produce that survey, and I want you to send me your survey questions or interview questions so that I can look over them. Okay, because in your holidays, I want you to be interviewing and I want you to be surveying. So 2 weeks time, you'll have your question, you'll have your focus questions, you'll have your interviews ready, you'll have your surveys ready. Holidays, you'll go and do it. Does that sort of make sense? Yeah, cool. Okay, great. Any questions? No? Okay, great. Off you go then.
Stop it.
I'm going to stop this now.
Oh, sorry. She had the biggest tantrum ever and made the teacher let her re-upload it so she could get the same grade as me. No, you don't. No, and I was like, I found it like offensive. She's like, Kayla, can you not get a better grade than me? I have to re-upload. So she